Oh, kind of had a weird day, you know. I mean that's usually what I talk about on Fez Night. I guess I'll just tell you. I could just do my Fez Night and talk to you.
Yeah.
Let's see that blog TV. I started to talk about that. That was kind of exciting. And when the phone rang, I was saying how I was able to purge a few of my personal demons, a lot of anger that I've had on
Right.
about YouTube and certain people. I was able to
Right.
vent, and then there was a little bit of drinking and smoking going on my end, and
Cool.
I sort of enjoyed it. So I sort of talked myself out as far as Fez Night. I almost wasn't going to do a Fez Night,
Yeah.
and then yeah, my job's going good. I still worry about the money. I don't know how I'm going to do it with the money. It's just
Right.
really, it's a very interesting place. Timmy is trying to figure out where I work. Pops, the brilliant guy he is, he's come to the conclusion that I'm recycling paper clips, which is completely stupid because basically paper clips is a type of iron or steel, and you'd be much better off like recycling cars. I mean, how much steel can you get out of a paper clip,
Right.
and so he's an idiot. Timmy has his ideas. I guess he's going to have some sort of contest. But the thing is, still, and then he says he knows my boss. Anybody out there? Can anybody tell me? Anybody out there uh, can tell me why they don't think that's creepy? In other words, most of you out there agree that's creepy. Is there anyone that disagrees? You know, I mean,
That
it
is
is
bizarre.
a form of stalking, right?
Yeah. Yeah. The cat is gone. There's something wrong with the mind.
Yeah.
That's strange.
And then
It's
Jeff
almost
is
like
Jeff is over there in the comments egging him on,
yeah.
So I
Yeah.
don't need it. But anyway, it'll be interesting. We'll see if Timmy shows up, and if he figures out where I work and shows up at the place of business. That'll be an interesting afternoon. But
Yeah.
they like me there, so I'm pretty solid. And Timmy never fails to make up stuff.
Right.
Like for instance, he makes up stuff like I can't afford the paper anymore. Well, I have the newspaper right here. I have a subscription. I don't go and buy the paper each day. And these are
Right.
just little things that bother me. But
Yeah.
so
But
that's normally
yeah.
what I would talk about on a Fez. Oh, and I'm drinking a beer tonight. I was going to pop open a beer right now.
Good. What are you having?
I'm having, there's a store called Fresh and Easy, and they have this cheap import called Dutch Republic. So I bought
Oh,
that. It's a pretty good deal.
cool.
It's like $4 for a six pack.
That's awesome. I like doing that stuff. I mean, I'll have a night where I want to. I think I told you this last time where I like a Mickey's Big Mouth, and I become kind of enjoying Sapporo. Have you ever had that?
Oh yeah,
It's
I worked in a
Japanese
Japanese
beer.
restaurant when I was a teenager and learned to love Japanese food, kirin, Sapporo, the beers,
Mm-hmm.
and sushi. It was really, and all the other
That's
stuff. Cheers,
some
Gino.
good stuff. I like it. It comes in a strange kind of can. I'm one of those marketing packaging freaks. When I see something, even if it's not that great, I'll try it just because of the way it looks.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it turned out to be really good. You know, nice ice cold and frozen mug or hell right out of the can. Doesn't really matter. And it's good. It's really good. It's kind of a dry beer, and
Yeah. Well,
pretty
support
good stuff.
Japanese beers. I don't know whether it had any influence to do with World War II, but I think Japanese beers are influenced by American beers a
Yeah.
lot because they're
Yeah.
definitely a British beer or an English beer is a lot heavier. German beers kind of have their own thing going. Uh,
Yeah,
you know,
they're heavy. They're kind of too heavy for
they're
me too
heavier,
much.
yeah. Whereas Sapporo and Kirin, they're very drinkable beer, typically of what American beers were after Prohibition. Prior to Prohibition,
Right,
though, there were a lot of small breweries that had very typical European style offerings. But
right,
after
right.
Prohibition,
I,
it was just taken over by the major breweries, and they wanted women to drink. And so they
oh
started.
yeah,
They made beers that were more less filling, so that
right,
that women would enjoy them too. So,
yeah, yeah. I live real close to Boulevard Brewing Company. Have you ever heard of Boulevard? They make a wheat beer.
is it a
Uh,
newer
uh,
company or is it an older one?
It's actually relatively new. I imagine Kansas City now for probably about 15, 16 years.
Okay,
Like that.
that's about when the microbrew revolution started happening in the U.S. here.
Yeah.
About 20 years ago, 25 years ago?
That's about the time it started, and we have a part of the city that they rehabbed, and they actually have some apartments that they call Soho, like in New York, and they bought an old building down there and turned it into a brewery, and my girlfriend loves that wheat beer, and
wheat beer's great. Yeah,
it's a pretty good beer, and I like some of those micro brews are pretty good.
Yeah, no, and there's so many of them now. We had about 25 years ago, there was a place called Columbia Street Brewery, one of the first places to do that, and you can go there and order food and look at the tanks. I forget what you call them. The big stainless steel tanks where the beer is fermenting, and you can see them kind of doing their thing, behind the big glass windows. And since then, there's been copycats of that, but there's a lot of them, and I always prefer that though.
Boulevard is you can walk through the city, and they have a city market where you can buy locally grown veggies and good stuff like that, and they're right there so that you can look from the outside in. So it's interesting. You can go in and have I don't know, now they probably got 30 different beers that they market, but it's nice. You can go hang out and enjoy yourself. They revamped the city, and it's actually safe to walk around without carrying a weapon with you. And,
well, that sounds...
Anytime you can go out to dinner and have a beer without having to carry a 9mm with you, it's pretty nice.
Yeah, that's always good. It's funny. That's a coincidence you should mention that. So is this, what you're talking about, the Boulevard, has it always, I mean, in let's say 15, 20 years ago, it wasn't safe like that, was it?
No.
Yeah,
no,
so
it wasn't any place you wanted to take a date.
Right.
You didn't want to be walking around down there after dark.
Yeah, well, that's a nice trend. It's a coincidence because I posted a little video of a place downtown San Diego here called Horton Plaza, and I sort of touched on the fact that before, downtown San Diego was where all the tattoo parlors and all the sailors, and it was not a place to bring a woman on a date.
Yeah,
Since then, they and it was dangerous, and they redid it. And Horton Plaza is this fancy shopping plaza, and they created this place called the Gaslamp Quarter, full of restaurants, and you go there at night, and you just feel like you're missing out on some big party, or you're not missing out.
Yeah.
You're around this big party, but
you ought to be flooded with Marines just getting out of boot and out where you live. I mean, I would think.
Well, Camp Pendleton still has, I guess, sort of that thing, but I'm talking like when I was a little kid. My mother went to go see some sort of religious revival. My dad wasn't religious, but my mom liked that sort of like tent revival stuff. So we ended up getting dragged downtown because there was going to be, and I remember being like holding on to my dad's hand. I must have been like 7 or 8 years old, and being afraid to let go because there was just crowds of people there. I could smell alcohol. And yeah, the sailors would get off the boat, and there were lockers where they could go change into their civilian clothes, and they would put their uniforms in these big lockers right around the bus station, and they would go out and get drunk, tie one on, and there were prostitutes and the whole thing. And so as a young man later, when I was a teenager, we would go down there. It was kind of fun, but that was right near the end of that whole trend. But it certainly wasn't a place that you would take a woman in heels in a dress, to go entertain. I mean, unless you're a big, tough Marine with a gun, then I guess you could, but,
It's kind of bizarre that you brought that up because I was having a conversation with my wife-to-be the other night. We were talking about all our friends, coming to the wedding, and we got onto the subject. I grew up I was a kid in the 60s, a teenager in the 70s, and I remember that we had a little shopping center close to our house where my mom, she didn't drive. And so she would walk me every week, twice a week, to guitar lessons. And I would carry my guitar with me, and it was like, you never had any worries. You didn't have to worry about anything. There weren't any crazies on the street. You could walk home at 10 o'clock at night. She would shop while I was, doing my guitar lesson thing, and it was as safe as could be. and you never had anything to worry about. There was no crime. There was no maniacs on the street. No chicken heads. No crack dealers. You know, none of that going on.
And where was this? Where was this? You grew up? Where was this?
St. Louis.
St. Louis.
I grew up in a little place called Richmond Heights in St. Louis. My brother was a police officer there, so it was just a cozy little safe place that you could do those kind of things.
Well, it was kind of like a nice suburb then, right?
Yeah, it was. It was in those days. It was an uppity little suburb. You know, it was where the people that finally made some money moved out. It was out of the city, and they had a safe little suburb to move into. Houses were relatively cheap, and it was funny because I was having this conversation where I had gone through some old paperwork trying to find my birth certificate for the marriage license, and I found a copy of the deed to the house that my mother and father bought when I was born, and it was relatively new, and it was a big a little bit over $12,000 it cost them, and it was an uppity house in those days. You know, I mean, it was a nice place. The neighborhood was a nice place, but I was thinking to myself, $12 grand, you know, $12,000 for a beautiful stucco home, and I was telling her, what a great time to grow up. I'm so glad that I grew up in that era, and that I'm not a kid now. It's just too much. It's too much for kids to have to deal with.
Yeah. Well, I think the American mindset has changed too. People were more satisfied with an affordable home, a simple home, you know, like you said, a stucco house. These days, when I was looking at, and I don't know what it's like in the rest of the country, but in San Diego, when I was helping a guy doing painting and decorating on Saturdays, what I saw the trend was when people bought a new house, it had to be, they were the McMansions, you know, this crazy foyer, and they're shoved right up against each other. But these houses are big, you know, and they're tall, but there's no yard to speak of. And, you know, and it's filled with, you know, I don't know. It's a bad trend, I think. I think it would be better if there was more simple, single-family homes without all these crazy amenities that people want now. I don't know. I don't know where we went wrong. But you look at the post-war housing. There's a place here called Allied Gardens, and it's a big difference, you know. And people, a friend of mine was like, the house was too old. She wasn't happy. I said, this is a great house.